There are stories that make the world seem extremely dark, like Hansel and Gretel's parents just leaving the poor children in the forest to die, for instance. This tale is even more sinister than that candy-coated nightmare, and it really makes you question, who is the monster after all? Hungry ogres, negligent parents, or the poor innocent children themselves? Does it all really work out in the end? Join me for a twisted old tale. Summon your familiars, light any fairy lights to keep the darkness at bay, grab a mug of your favorite tea, and follow me. Once upon a time, there was a bundle maker and his wife who had 7 children, all boys. The eldest was but 10 years old, the youngest only 7. Well, they were busy. Hopefully there's some twins or triplets in that bunch. They were very poor, and their 7 children were a great burden to them because not one of them was able to earn his own living. What worried them still more was that the youngest was a delicate little fellow who hardly ever spoke a word. They took for stupidity this silence, which was really a sign of good sense. He was tiny, too. When he was born, he was no bigger than a man's thumb, so they called him Hop o' My Thumb. The poor child was the drudge of the whole household and always bore the blame for everything that went wrong. However, he really was the cleverest and brightest of all the brothers, and if he spoke little, he heard and thought the more. There came now a very bad year, and the famine was so great that these poor people felt obliged to get rid of their children. One evening, when the children had gone to bed and the bundle maker was sitting with his wife at the fire, he said to her, with his heart ready to burst with grief, "You see plainly that we can no longer give our children food, and I cannot bear to see them die of hunger before my eyes. I am resolved to lose them in the forest tomorrow. This may very easily be done, for while they are amusing themselves and tying up the bundles, we have only to slip away and leave them without their taking any notice." "Ah," cried his wife, "do you think you could really take out your children and lose them?" In vain did her husband remind her of their extreme poverty. She would not consent to it. She was poor, but she was their mother. At last, when she reflected what a grief it would be to her to see them die of hunger, she consented and went weeping to bed. Hop o' My Thumb heard all they had said, for when he heard, as he lay there in bed, that they were talking of their affairs, he got up and softly slipped under his father's stool to hear without being seen. He went to bed again, but did not sleep a wink all the rest of the night, thinking of what he should do. He got up early in the morning and went to the bank of a brook where he filled his pockets full of small white pebbles, and then went back home. Extremely small white pebbles, given his size. Back at home, they all set out, but Hop o' My Thumb did not say a word to any of his brothers about what he had heard. They went into a very thick forest where they could not see one another 10 paces apart. The bundle maker began to cut wood and the children to gather up the sticks to make bundles. When their father and mother saw them busy at work, they slipped away from them little by little, and then made their escape all at once by a winding bypath. When the children found that they were all alone, they began to cry bitterly. Hop o' My Thumb let them cry on, knowing very well how he could get them home again, for, as he came, he had dropped the little white pebbles he had in his pockets all along the way. Then he said to them, "Do not be afraid, my brothers. Father and mother have left us here, but I will lead you home again. Only follow me." They followed him, and he brought them home through the forest by the very same way by which they had come. At first they dared not go in, but stood outside the door to listen to what their father and mother were saying. Just as the woodcutter and his wife reached home, the lord of the manor sent them 10 crowns, which he had owed them for a long time and which they had never expected to get. This gave them new life, for the poor people were almost famished with hunger. As it was a long while since they had eaten, the woman bought as much meat as would satisfy 6 or 8 persons, almost like a whole family. When they had satisfied their hunger, she said, "Alas, where are our poor children now? They would make a good feast of what we have left here." It was you, William, who wished to lose them. I told you we should repent of it. What are they doing now in the forest? Alas, perhaps the wolves have already eaten them up. You are very cruel to have lost our children in this way." The woodcutter grew very impatient at last, for she repeated more than 20 times that they should repent of it, and that she had told him so. He threatened to beat her if she did not hold her tongue. The woodcutter was perhaps even more sorry than his wife, but she teased him, and he could not endure her telling him that she was right all the time. She wept bitterly, saying, "Alas, where are my children now? My poor children." Maybe getting a candle and looking in the forest would be an idea, but she said this once so very loud that the children who were at the door heard her and cried out all together, "Here we are! Here we are!" She ran quickly to let them in and said, as she embraced them, "How happy I am to see you again, my dear children. You must be very tired and very hungry. And you, little Peter, you are dirt all over. Come in and let me get you clean again." Peter was her eldest boy, whom she loved more than all the rest because he had red hair like her own. They sat down to table and ate with an appetite which pleased both father and mother, to whom they told, speaking all at once, how frightened they had been in the forest. The good people were delighted to see their children once more, and this joy continued while the 10 crowns lasted. But when the money was all gone, they fell back again into their former anxiety and resolved to lose their children again. And that they might be the surer of doing it, they decided to take them much farther off than before. Well, I guess when the going gets tough, it's time to lose your kids in the forest again and pretend to mourn them. I do have to appreciate the passive language in lose their children, like this is not a decision they are actively making. Anyway, they could not talk of this so secretly, but that they were overheard by Hop o' My Thumb, who counted on getting out of the difficulty as he had done before. But though he got up very early the next morning to go and pick up some little pebbles, he could not carry out his plan, for he found the house door double locked. He did not know what to do, but a little later, when his father had given them each a piece of bread for their breakfast, it came into his head that he could make the bread do instead of pebbles by dropping crumbs all along the way as they went. So he put it into his pocket. They were now in great trouble, for the farther they went, the more they went wrong and the deeper they got into the forest. Night came on, and with it a high wind which frightened them desperately. They fancied they heard on every side the howling of wolves coming to eat them up. They hardly dared to speak or turn their heads. Then there came a heavy rain which wetted them to the very skin. Their feet slipped at every step and they fell into the mud, getting themselves so covered with dirt that they could not even get it off their hands. Oh, what would Mommy Dearest say about poor, precious, mud-caked Peter now, I wonder? She's probably too busy going off to market again to give this a spare thought. Hop o' My Thumb climbed to the top of a tree to see if he could discover anything. Searching on every side, he saw at last a glimmering light, like that of a candle, but a long way off, and beyond the forest. He came down, but when he was upon the ground, he could not see it. This discouraged him very much, but finally, when he had begun walking for some time with his brothers toward that side on which he had seen the light, he caught sight of it again as he came out of the wood. They came at last to the house where this candle was, although not without many frights, for they lost sight of it every time they came into a hollow, which was very often. They knocked at the door, and a kind woman came to open it. She asked them what they all wanted, and Hop o' My Thumb told her that they had lost their way in the forest and begged to stay and sleep there for charity's sake. When the woman saw how pretty they were, she began to weep and said to them, "Alas, poor children, you do not know what kind of place you have come to. Do you know that this house belongs to a cruel ogre who eats up little children?" "Alas, dear madam," answered Hop o' My Thumb, who was trembling in every limb, as were his brothers too. "What shall we do? The wolves of the forest will surely devour us if you refuse us shelter here, and so we would rather the gentleman should eat us. Perhaps he will have pity on us if you are so kind as to entreat him for us." The ogre's wife, who believed that she could hide them from her husband till morning, let them come in and had them warm themselves at a very good fire, before which a whole sheep was being roasted for the ogre's supper. As they were beginning to get warm, they heard 3 or 4 great raps at the door. This was the ogre, who was coming home. His wife hurried the children under the bed to hide them, and then went to open the door. The ogre at once asked if supper was ready and the wine drawn, and sat down at the table. The sheep was raw still, but he liked it better for that. But in a minute or two he sniffed about to the left and to the right, saying, "I smell fresh meat. I smell fresh meat." "What you smell," said his wife, "must be the calf which I have just killed and dressed." "I smell fresh meat, I tell you once more," said the ogre, looking crossly at his wife. "And there is something here which I do not understand." As he spoke these words, he got up from the table and went straight to the bed. "Aha," he said, "this is how you thought to cheat me, wretch. I do not know why I do not eat you up too. It is well for you that you are old and tough. Here is game which comes just in season to entertain 3 ogres, friends of mine, who are to pay me a visit in a day or 2. Out of the forest and into the frying pan with this one, huh? With that, he dragged them out from under the bed one by one. The poor children fell upon their knees and begged for pardon, but they had to deal with the most cruel of ogres, who, far from having any pity for them, had already devoured them with his eyes, and now told his wife they would be dainty morsels when she served them up with a good sauce. He then fetched a great knife and began to sharpen it on a great whetstone, which he held in his left hand, and all the while he came nearer and nearer to the poor children. He had already taken hold of one of them when his wife said to him, "Why do you need to do it at this time of night? Is not tomorrow time enough?" "Hold your prating," said the ogre. "They will grow more tender if they are kept a little while after they are killed." "But you have so much meat already," replied his wife. "Here are a calf, 2 sheep, and half a pig." "You are right," said the ogre. "Give them all a good supper, that they may not get thin, and put them to bed." The good woman was overjoyed at this, and gave them a good supper, but they were so afraid that they could not eat a bit. As for the ogre, he sat down again to drink, well pleased that he had such a feast with which to treat his friends. He drank a dozen glasses more than usual, which went to his head and soon obliged him to go to bed. The ogre had 7 daughters who were still little children. These young ogresses had all of them very fine complexions, because they ate raw meat like their father, but they had small gray eyes, quite round hooked noses, wide mouths, and very long, sharp teeth, set very far apart from each other. They were not very wicked yet, but they gave the promise of becoming so, for they had already bitten little children. They had been put to bed early, all 7 in one great bed, each with a crown of gold upon her head. There was another bed of the same size in the same room, and in this the ogre's wife put the 7 little boys, and then went to bed herself along with her husband. Oh no. Hop o' My Thumb took notice that the ogre's daughter all had crowns of gold on their head, and he was so afraid lest the ogre should repent his not killing them that he got up at about midnight and, taking his brother's caps and his own, went very softly and put them on the heads of the 7 little ogresses. But first he took off their crowns of gold and put them on his own head and his brother's, so that the ogre might take them for his daughters and his daughters for the little boys whom he wanted to kill. Everything turned out just as he had thought, for the ogre, waking about midnight, began to feel sorry that he had put off killing the little boys till morning, when he might have done it overnight, so he jumped up quickly out of bed, taking his great knife. "Let us see," he said, "how our little rogues are getting on, and do the job up at once." He groped his way up to his daughter's room and went to the bed where the little boys lay, all fast asleep, except for Hop o' My Thumb, who was terribly afraid when he found the ogre fumbling about his head, as he had done about his brothers. When he had felt the crowns of gold, he said, "Truly, I should have done a pretty piece of work last night. It is perfectly evident that I drank too much wine then." Next, he went to the bed where the girls lay, and when he felt the boys' caps, he said, "Ah, my merry lads, here you are. Let us get to work." And saying these words, without more ado, he cut the throats of all his 7 daughters. Well pleased with what he had done, he went back to bed again. As soon as Hop o' My Thumb heard the ogre snore, he waked his brothers and told them to put on their clothes quickly and follow him. They stole down softly into the garden and got over the wall. They ran almost all night, trembling all the while, and without knowing where they were going, despite all the wolves that were still out there. The ogre, when he woke, said to his wife, "Go up and dress those young rascals who came here last night." The ogress was very much surprised at this goodness of her husband, not dreaming of the manner in which she was to dress them. But thinking he had ordered her to go up and put on their clothes, she went up and was horrified when she saw her daughters all dead. She fell in a faint. The ogre, feeling that his wife would be too long in doing what he had ordered, went up himself to help her. He was no less amazed than his wife at this frightful spectacle. "Oh, what have I done?" he cried. "But the wretches shall pay for it, and that instantly." He threw a pitcher of water upon his wife's face, and as soon as she came to herself, he said, "Bring me quickly my 7-league boots, that I might go and catch them." So, quick recap, drunk ogre, despite his wife begging him not to, goes to kill the 7 boys, ends up sloppily killing his own daughters instead, can't be bothered to check his work or clean it up, and goes back to bed with the meat essentially spoiling through the night. Next day, he sends his wife up to clean his mess. She is heartbroken at what he did to her daughters. He only bothers to check on her because she's not working fast enough for his liking. When sober and confronted with his drunken massacre, he gets upset, so dumps water on the wife so that she can find his magical boots for his vengeance. This ogre can't really do anything for himself, can he? I really feel for the ogress letting strangers stay in her home when the boys' own parents couldn't keep them, only to have her own children offed by her husband for her kindness. Oh well, I do love it when 7-league boots pop up in stories though regardless. Anyway, he went out into the country, and after running in all directions, he turned at last into the very road which the poor children were, not more than 100 paces from their father's house, to which they were running. They espied the ogre, who went at one step from mountain to mountain and over rivers and easily at the narrowest brooks. Hop o' My Thumb, seeing a hollow rock near the place where they were, made his brothers hide in it and crowded into it himself, watching always to see what would become of the ogre. The ogre, who found himself very tired with his long and fruitless journey, for 7-league boots are very tiring to wear, and had a great mind to rest himself, and happened to sit down upon the very rock where the little boys had hidden themselves. As he was completely worn out, he fell asleep and began to snore so frightfully that the poor children were no less afraid of him than when he held up his great knife and was going to cut their throats. Hop o' My Thumb was not so much frightened as his brothers. He told them to run quickly home while the ogre was still sleeping and not to worry about him. They took his advice and soon got home safely. Hop o' My Thumb then went up to the ogre, pulled off his boots gently, and put them on his own legs. They were very long and large, but as they were fairy boots, they had the gift of becoming big or little according to the legs of those who wore them. So they fitted his feet and legs just as well as if they had been made for him on purpose. As soon as Hop o' My Thumb had made sure of the ogre's 7-league boots, he went to the palace and offered his services to carry orders from the king to his army, which was a great way off, and to bring back the quickest accounts of the battle they were just at the time fighting with the enemy. He thought he could be of more use to the king than all of his male coaches, and so might make his fortune in this manner. War trade, love it, Hop o' My Thumb. He succeeded so well in a short time that he had made enough money to keep himself, his father and mother, and his 6 brothers without their having to tire themselves out with working for all the rest of their lives. He then went home to his father's house, where he was welcomed with great joy. As the great fame of his boots had been talked of at court by this time, the king sent for him and employed him on the greatest affairs of the state, so that he became one of the richest men in the kingdom. Is Hop o' My Thumb still 7 years old? And very, very small? Quite the illustrious career for one so young. He does know how to play to his strengths and leverage his stature. But now, let us see what became of the ogre. He slept so soundly that he never knew that his boots were gone, but he fell from the corner of the rock where Hop o' My Thumb and his brothers had left him, and bruised himself so badly from head to foot that he could not stir. So he was forced to stretch himself out at full length and wait for someone to come and help him. Now a good many woodcutters passed near the place where the ogre lay, and when they heard him groan, they went up to ask him what was the matter. But the ogre had eaten so many children in his lifetime that he had grown so very big and fat that these men could not have carried even one of his legs. So they were forced to leave him there. At last night came on, and then a large serpent came out of the wood nearby and stung him, so that he died in great pain. As soon as Hop o' My Thumb heard of the ogre's death, he told the king, whose great favorite he had become, all that the good-natured ogress had done to save the lives of himself and his brothers. The king was so much pleased at what he had heard that he asked Hop o' My Thumb what favor he could bestow upon her. Hop o' My Thumb thanked his majesty and desired that the ogress might have the noble title of Duchess of Draggletail given to her, which was no sooner asked than granted. The ogress then came to court and lived happily for many years, enjoying the vast fortune she found in the ogre's chests. As for Hop o' My Thumb, he grew more witty and brave every day until at last the king made him the greatest lord in the kingdom and set him over all his affairs. The end of the very twisted and tragic fairy tale, Hop o' My Thumb. Not to be confused with Tom Thumb, who is also the same height. This one was much darker. Not only is there questionable parenting, the first parents leaving their children to die in the forest, not once, regretting it, but twice, after said painful regret. The character I feel for the most in all of this is, of course, the ogress, letting these 7 miserable souls into the house so they're not eaten by wolves, hiding them, lying to the husband, trying to save them. The 7 end up to be pretty conniving, well, Hop o' My Thumb does, and her own daughters are sacrificed to save them. Not something she signed up for. I feel for her so much. I'm glad she got the title of Duchess of Draggletail, and hopefully that helped her cope a little bit. I do appreciate that this fairy tale took on making a fortune in war, not something you would expect from the outset. But such is the way with old fairy tales. But before we continue on, did you know that A Bit Late is now a podcast? You can find it wherever you listen to your podcast, and of course on Nebula ad-free, including this brand new story. It's easy to feel hopeless in a big world. So how can one small person really make a difference? Now, a lot of old tales are dark and grim, showing us the worst parts of humanity. But then you stumble across a gem like this lighthearted but still old school twisted tale and get a little, much needed chuckle back into your soul. Yes, there are exorcisms, possessed animals, thieves, butcherings, regurgitations, digestions, and dark Pinocchio vibes. But there are also a lot of laughs along the way. And you can dive into it right now on Nebula first before it's out on YouTube. I release all of my stories early on Nebula first, and you can find all of my past stories, ASMR videos, and growing library of podcast episodes ad-free on Nebula as well. And if you love stories and podcasts, you'll really want to check out the Sojourn audio drama. With humanity on the brink of collapse, a desperate multinational mission sets out to explore a distant nebula in search of life-saving resources. The crews face not only division within the expedition itself, but an unexpected new threat, a fanatical alien race who will stop at nothing to eliminate outsiders. The Sojourn is an epic interstellar adventure grounded in a rich sci-fi universe inspired by the Age of Sail, told entirely through audio with veteran voice actors, immersive sounds, and a sweeping original soundtrack. And their original, Faithless, is exclusively on Nebula right now. Now, A Bit Late is a small, quiet corner of the internet, and Nebula's support does make a difference in sharing stories with you. To get early access on Nebula first and access all of my videos without ads, please check out my links. go.nebula.tv/abitlate. You can get 40% off Nebula, or $36 per year, $3 a month. And you can go watch this new classic old story right now. And if you're already on Nebula, you can share guest passes with your friends so they can access it too for a full week. Or if you know they'll love Nebula, check out our monthly and yearly gift cards. Nebula has absolutely made a difference in me making these videos, and by signing up using my links, it makes it more possible. Thank you for being here and for checking out Nebula. Thank you, friends and fiends, for being with me for the story Hop on My Thumb. I hope you enjoyed the telling of it. But for now, off to sleep and dream what you will, or stay a while and enjoy another tale. Whichever you choose, I'll speak to you again, and until then, stay spooky, my friends. Good night.